The White Trail, written by Barbara Davoll, illustrated by Dennis Hockerman. Christopher Churchmouse and his best friend Freddie Field Mouse waited patiently behind the door of the church kitchen for darkness to come.
"It's almost dark,"
whispered Freddie nervously to Christopher.
"Yes, we can leave in just a minute,"
answered Christopher.
"How will we carry the food back to our homes?"
asked Freddie.
"We won't,"
said Christopher.
"We'll just eat what we want in the kitchen. Then nobody will ever know we took it."
"Oh," replied Freddie,
"I thought we were going to get some to eat later." "No, that's too risky. If my mama and papa knew what I was doing, they would be very angry. I don't dare take any home. Come on, it's dark enough now," said
Christopher, stepping cautiously from behind the door.
"Follow me."
The mice scampered silently into the big church kitchen.
"Come on over this way to the cupboards,"
whispered Christopher.
"That's where the goodies are." "What if Tuffy hears us?"
Freddie asked anxiously.
"Oh, I can take care of that cat,"
Christopher said boldly.
"How will we get the food?" "You worry too much, Freddie,"
said Christopher impatiently.
"I told you I know the ropes. Just watch me."
And Christopher jumped up on the handle of the big cabinet's bottom drawer.
"Hop up here like this."
Soon he was on top of the counter.
"The food is in that top cabinet. All we have to do is push here and presto, the door opens. Come on, give me a boost,"
demanded Christopher. By standing on Freddie's shoulders, Christopher could reach the top cabinet. Then he pulled Freddie up.
"Now for the goodies,"
squealed Christopher.
"Wow, what's in all these canisters?"
asked Freddie.
"Well, this one has oatmeal, and this one has rice, and this one has sugar. Good, sticky, sweet stuff. Come on, let's get these lids off." "Hey, Christopher, this stuff is good,"
squeaked Freddie, taking a big pawful of oatmeal.
"I know. Wait till you try this brown sugar. It's yummy." "Oh, it's too bad we can't take some home with us,"
said Freddie.
"Yeah, but we can come back anytime we want." "Mm-hmm,"
said Freddie, with his mouth so full he couldn't talk. Finally, Christopher said,
"I'm full. We'd better be getting home. Help me put these lids on." "Why do we need to put the lids back?"
asked Freddie.
"Let's just go." No, Freddie," exclaimed Christopher. "You put all the lids back so nobody will know we were here."
"Okay," agreed Freddie. Soon the last lid was on. Then, just as the mice were ready to hop out of the cabinet, Freddie knocked over the canister of flour, spilling it on the counter. In trying to catch his balance, Freddie tumbled right into the big hill of flour.
"Help! Christopher! I can't breathe!"
screamed Freddie, who looked like a white lump.
"I'm coming!"
yelled Christopher as he jumped down.
"Boy, are you a mess!"
he said, pulling his friend out of the flour.
"Oh, I know that,"
said Freddie, coughing and sputtering.
"Well, there's no way to keep anybody from knowing we've been here,"
said Christopher as he tried to brush flour off Freddie.
"Let's get home as fast as we can."
By this time, Christopher was covered with flour, too.
"Oh, Chris, you look funny,"
Freddie said with a laugh.
"You look like a white mouse." "You don't look any different,"
said Christopher.
"Come on, hurry."
Together, the mice jumped down and ran to Christopher's home.
"We'd better get rid of this flour,"
whispered Christopher, taking his mother's whisk broom from the closet.
"Yeah, you brush me off, and I'll brush you off."
So Christopher turned around and around as Freddie brushed him, and he did the same for Freddie.
There, now you are a gray mouse again. Yes, and I better get home fast,
Freddie said, heading for the door. The next morning, Christopher was still sleeping when Mama called. "Christopher, wake up. Please wake up quickly."
Oh, what's wrong, Mama?
Asked Christopher, sleepily rubbing his eyes. "Oh, Christopher, after your papa left for work this morning, someone set a trap."
What?
The janitor set a trap right outside our front door.
Why would he do that?
Stammered Christopher. "I don't know, but we have to warn Papa. He'll walk around the corner and right into that trap for sure," said Mama anxiously. Jumping out of bed, Christopher said,
"I'll get Freddie, and he and I will see what we can find out."
"Please be careful, son."
I will, Mama.
Later, Christopher and Freddie peered around the corner. The trap was huge. The bait was a piece of yellow cheese.
Wow, look at that hunk of cheese,
said Freddie.
Yes, answered Christopher, and look at that trap. Freddie, that trap could kill my papa.
I know. But why would the janitor put it in front of your house?
I don't know,
said Christopher. Just then, the mice heard a noise and scampered off to hide in the janitor's closet. Soon they heard him come into the closet. Tuffy the cat was at his heels.
"Well, Tuffy," said the janitor, "we've got the mice cornered. Yup, that white trail of flour led right to their doorstep. Now all we've got to do is wait for them to fall into our trap, and we'll be rid of them."
Christopher and Freddie froze in horror. The janitor left the closet humming a tune. Tuffy followed him.
Christopher,
said Freddie.
The flour led him to your door. Yes, Freddie, it's all my fault. How am I going to protect my family from the trap?
He cried.
I'll tell you what, suggested Freddie. You take one corner of the church, and I'll take the other, and we'll watch for your father to come home. Then we'll see him whichever way he comes and warn him. Yes, but Papa will have to know why the trap is there, and I'll have to tell him. I can't lie to him. I guess not, Freddie agreed. Well, anyway, at least we can keep him from getting caught in the trap. Let's go.
The mice slithered underneath the janitor's closet door and went to their lookout posts. It was a long, tiresome wait before Christopher saw his papa coming down one of the long halls of the church.
Psst! Papa, over here, over here,
whispered Christopher. Papa came to the door where Christopher was hiding. Son, what are you doing here? Asked Papa.
Papa, I have something to tell you. I wanted to catch you before you got home because there is a trap right outside our door. Mama and I were afraid you would walk right into it.
Oh, my, exclaimed Papa. I'm glad you told me. But why is the trap there? The janitor knows we're honest mice and don't take anything except leftovers.
Well, Papa, well,
stammered the guilty little mouse. What is it, Christopher?
Well, sometimes at night, Freddie and I go to the kitchen and take stuff.
The shocked look on Christopher's father's face made Christopher hang his head.
Oh, Papa, I'm sorry, but all we did was get into those canisters and eat some sugar and oatmeal and stuff. We didn't bring anything home, and we always put the lids on so things wouldn't spoil.
Why, son? Didn't you know that was stealing?
Well, yes. No, Papa. I don't know. I didn't think it was stealing because we didn't take anything and keep it. All we did was eat it there. Besides, we were hungry.
Doesn't your mama cook a delicious supper every evening, and don't you eat till you're full?
Yes, Papa.
Christopher was so embarrassed and ashamed. Suddenly, he realized he was a thief. How did the janitor know you had been stealing? Asked Papa.
Well, last night Freddie spilled the flour. Then we both got covered with it.
Oh, Christopher, groaned Papa.
We brushed ourselves, but we couldn't get it all off. This morning, we heard the janitor say that a white trail led right to our door.
And with that, Christopher began to cry and sob as if his heart would break.
Oh, Papa, I'm so sorry. Now all the church mice are in danger.
Yes, we'll all have to stay inside until the janitor takes the trap away. It's just too dangerous to let any of the little children out to play. They would get caught for sure. Christopher, you know, too, that stealing is wrong. I heard the pastor say that one of God's laws is, "You shall not steal." The pastor said those words are in the Bible. We're supposed to work for what we have. There are always plenty of crumbs and bits of food for us here in the church. We don't need to become thieves.
Oh, Papa, I've made a terrible mess, haven't I?
Yes, you have, son. You've caused the janitor to mistrust all of us just because you and Freddie stole.
I am sorry, Papa.
Later that night, Christopher was sitting in the living room with Mama and Papa. "Christopher," said Papa, "I've been thinking what would be the best way to correct you for your disobedience. Remember, God's word tells people, 'Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands.' Those words give me an idea, Christopher. Because you are the cause of the trap, I believe you should be the one to work and bring food to us. You can go out the back way. Take your wagon and bring home whatever crumbs you find. Maybe working for the food will help you remember not to steal."
How long will they leave that trap out there?
Asked Christopher. "I don't know," said Papa. "It could be quite a while." The trap was there for a whole week, and during that time, Christopher brought food to his family every day. You can be sure Christopher had learned his lesson and never again stole from the church kitchen or anywhere else. I'd like for you to say the Bible verse with me. Let him that stole steal no more. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. Let's say it one more time. Let him that stole steal no more. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. Can you answer these questions about the story? Why did Christopher and Freddie get into trouble? Do you think Christopher and Freddie really meant to steal? What should you do if you have stolen something?
Sometimes you have a wicked little thought, and you think you surely won't get caught. And no matter what you've been taught, you decide to steal. You decide to steal. No matter what you do or what you feel, the Bible says it's very wrong to steal. There's no question of let's make a
A Sunday Surprise, written by Barbara Davoll, illustrated by Dennis Hockerman. Christopher Churchmouse sat in his favorite Sunday morning place, hidden in the soft, heavy folds of the red velvet window curtain. He looked over the church filled with people. From his hiding place, he could see everything, and what he saw amazed him.
It's the first day of spring weather,
Thought Christopher.
Maybe that's why the children are behaving so very badly in church.
Billy Stern, sitting between his mother and his sister Susie, was acting the worst of all. He was running a very noisy toy truck along the back of the pew in front of him. Christopher could see it was annoying the people sitting in front of Billy, for they kept turning around and glaring at him. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack went the toy. Billy paid no attention at all to those who were staring at him.
Why doesn't Mrs. Stern do something about the noise her son is making?
Christopher wondered.
Maybe she is hard of hearing. Surely she has taught Billy to behave in church. Why, it's awful the disturbance he's causing.
Just ahead of the Sterns sat two little girls who were talking, giggling, and acting very silly.
Can't someone tell them to be quiet?
Christopher kept hoping, but no one did.
These children are behaving much worse than my mice friends ever would.
From across the aisle came a crackling noise that sounded like fire. Christopher was ready to jump and run when he saw it wasn't a fire at all. Some children were eating candy and rattling their candy bags.
Do they know how much noise they are making?
Christopher wondered as he watched them put one candy after another into their mouths.
Why, even the mice children were not allowed to touch any crumbs they might find when the church service was in progress.
Christopher was disgusted.
These children are very naughty,
He said to himself.
I can't believe the way they behave in church.
Just then, there was a loud pop on the other side of Billy Stern. Christopher was so surprised he nearly fell out of his hiding place in the curtain. What he saw was a strange sight. A boy sitting near Billy had his cheeks puffed out. The boy stuck out his tongue with some gum on it and then blew. As Christopher watched in amazement, a great round ball came out of the boy's mouth. It grew bigger and bigger, then pop! The ball had burst, and the boy was picking the gum off his face and eyes and poking it back into his mouth again.
What is that?
Exclaimed Christopher. He had never seen bubble gum before.
Why doesn't he just chew the stuff up and swallow it? Sometimes people are really hard to understand. We mice could teach them a thing or two about behaving in church.
Then the organ began to play. This was one of Christopher's favorite times in church, for he loved the beautiful music. Some men were passing offering plates down each row. Christopher knew the people were putting money into the offering plates because they loved the Lord and wanted to give to his work. Leaning way out, Christopher saw the men passing the offering plate to the people sitting in front of the Stern family. Soon the plate would be passed to Mrs. Stern. Squinting his eyes to see better, Christopher saw something long and brown in the plate of money.
That looks like a mouse tail,
He said to himself. Peering closely, he saw to his horror that the tail belonged to his smallest cousin Ned, who was sound asleep in the offering plate. Ned's tiny tail was sticking out over the plate, and his plump little body was covered with money. Apparently, the people hadn't even noticed him as they passed the plate and dropped in their money. He was very tiny and still, and about the same color as the velvet lining of the plate. Christopher knew naughty Ned must have been playing in the plates and had fallen asleep. Chris was frantic. What could he do? Ned would surely be discovered soon. What an awful predicament. Now the man was passing the plate to Mrs. Stern. Just as she took the plate, Ned moved and stretched his little legs. Christopher had no time to think. As Mrs. Stern saw the little mouse, she screamed and jumped up quickly, upsetting the plate of money and knocking down the man who had passed it to her. The money clanged and jangled as it rolled underneath the pews. Christopher stretched too far out of the curtain and fell to the floor. There was so much commotion, he hardly knew what to do. Billy and Susie Stern had set up a yowl. Mrs. Stern was shrieking and hopping around in the aisle. Several ladies had climbed up onto the seats, holding up their skirts and screaming. Shaking himself off from the fall, Christopher shouted to Ned, who by this time was awake.
Let's get out of here,
Squeaked Christopher. Christopher grabbed Ned's paw, and together they ran as fast as their legs could go. Down the aisle and out into the hall ran the two little mice. They could still hear the women screaming and the pastor trying to bring order back to the service. The way home seemed endless as they raced along. Darting into Christopher's little hole-in-the-wall home, they slumped to the floor to catch their breaths. Just then, the door opened. They were startled to see the whole Churchmouse family staring in at them from the hall. Mama and Papa Churchmouse were standing quietly in the doorway. Ned's Papa and Mama, Uncle Rudy and Aunt Snooty were there too, with all of their mice children trailing behind them. All the mice had very solemn faces, even Grandma and Grandpa Churchmouse. Christopher's little friend Mandy Mouse was there, looking very sad and disappointed. Papa Churchmouse was the first to speak. "What happened up there?" he asked in a serious voice. Christopher did not want to tell on Ned, but he didn't see how he could help it.
Well, sir, he squeaked unhappily, you see, Ned fell asleep in the money plate, and Mrs. Stern saw him and screamed. Then everything happened. She jumped up, the man got knocked down,
And the whole church service was disturbed, said Papa. Oh, I'm so ashamed. I thought we had taught you mice to behave better than that.
But, Papa, said Christopher, it wasn't my fault. I was just sitting there when it all happened. Besides, we were much better than the children. They were talking, eating candy, blowing bubblegum, and even playing with toys in church. They were awful.
Don't compare yourselves to them, said Papa. They must answer for their bad behavior. You mice caused much more of a disturbance than the children. You interrupted the whole church service. Christopher and Ned hung their heads in shame.
I'm sure Ned didn't mean to fall asleep in the offering plate,
said Christopher helpfully.
No, but our misbehavior always catches up with us,
said Uncle Rudy.
Ned knows better than to play in the church sanctuary. That is where the people worship God. I'm afraid there is one little mouse who hasn't learned how to behave himself yet, Uncle Rudy said, taking Ned firmly by the paw. I think that lesson had better be learned right now.
With that, he took Ned to their own little home for the correction he needed. The rest of the family disappeared to their own homes too, except for Grandpa and Grandma, who stood looking thoughtfully at Christopher. Hanging his head, Christopher said,
I'm so ashamed. I really didn't mean any harm, but now everyone will think I did. I don't ever want to go back again.
Grandpa laid his hand kindly on Christopher's shoulder.
I wouldn't feel like that if I were you, he said.
You wouldn't?
Questioned Christopher.
No, my boy, said Grandpa. There's a lesson to be learned from all of this. For some of us, the lessons come harder than others. You'll feel better about it soon. Just see that you do what is right yourself, and don't worry about what others do and think.
Yes, Grandpa,
replied Christopher meekly. Grandpa and Grandma went to their own home then, leaving Christopher with his mother and father. Christopher was feeling very sad. Then Papa said, I know you're feeling badly about this morning.
Oh, yes, Papa,
replied Christopher.
I just feel awful. Everyone will remember what happened, and they'll know I'm Ned's cousin,
said Christopher unhappily. Papa said, "Come, sit with me, Chris, while Mama fixes our lunch." Papa sat down in his big chair. And although Christopher was growing up, he climbed onto Papa's lap. Then Christopher's kind Papa explained to him that people should not go to church to be seen by others. He told Christopher that the church building is a place to worship and hear about God. Papa said that people came to church to learn about God, and that's very important for boys and girls and men and women. We must be very quiet and respectful in church. Then we won't disturb anyone and keep them from hearing the truth from God's Word. As Papa talked, Christopher began to understand why it was so necessary to be quiet and not disturb the service. When Mama called them to lunch, Christopher was snuggled up, fast asleep on Papa's lap. "Well, Papa," she asked, "did you have a good talk?" "Yes," said Papa, smiling, "and I think he'll be a much wiser mouse. Now he really understands why it is so important to behave properly in church." Here is a Bible verse that goes with this story. I am writing you these instructions so that you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. I'll explain what some of those words mean. Conduct themselves means how to act, and God's household can mean in church. So the verse means that God expects us to act in a right way when we are in His house or in church. Now let's say the verse together. I am writing you these instructions so that you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. Here are some questions about this story that I'd like for you to answer. Where was Christopher when he heard the noisy children? What did the boy have on his tongue or in his mouth? Why was Ned in the plate of money? Do you remember what Papa Churchmouse said about behaving in church? Did this story help you think about how you should act in church?
I am learning to behave in the house of my God. I am learning to behave in the house of my God. I will listen, I will pray, I will listen and obey. I am learning to behave in the house of my God.
You've just seen two stories of Christopher Churchmouse and his little friends. Be sure to see Christopher's other great video adventures as well. You can also read about him in each Christopher Churchmouse classic. Christopher Churchmouse classics are available alone and in book cassette format, ideal for early readers and preschoolers who want to read while they listen. All 12 Christopher Churchmouse classics are beautifully illustrated, high-quality cloth-bound books that are thoroughly entertaining and teach important spiritual truths. So, be prepared. Your kids may want you to read Christopher Churchmouse classics again and again and again.